Vince, why don't you kick us off while we're
Let's
while
do it. We got some announcements, everybody. We're going to kick this off right now. Matthew and I are going to walk through some announcements, and just want to let you all know there is a question, a Q&A button here. You should see it on your panel there. Feel free to ask us anything in that Q&A. It's better if you do it there. It'll get lost inside the chat. So if you do it in the Q&A, it'll be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll kick this thing off.
What's up, Timmy?
they've upgraded the Dodson swag there. Very impressive, Tim.
This is literally from 4 years ago, I believe.
Oh, well, never mind.
It's our maintenance flannels.
It's our maintenance flannel.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So we have some announcements. First, we do want to thank our sponsor, AppFolio. AppFolio was kind enough to sponsor this webinar. I know that several of you are on here because you got an email from AppFolio about this webinar. So we've been a long time user of AppFolio, Matthew, hadn't we?
We sure have, and they've been very kind to send everything out. They don't pay us like they pay a bunch of other people that sponsor, but we're still good friends with that.
Well, we're not influencers like Tim is, so it's hard to get paid.
Well, that's what pushed them across the finish line. They were like, no, and then we said Tim was going to be here, so they decided to.
President.
They paid me.
They're paying you.
Yeah, they're paying me right now.
All right, moving on. Next webinar is going to be March 7th with Deb Newell. That's going to be again, we have these monthly webinars. The next one's going to be with Deb. Go ahead and sign up. You can see McKenna has dropped it in the chat where you can sign up for that webinar. We'd love for you to be back. Deb's very successful consultant in the industry. She ran a property management company and a maintenance division, sold it, has done very well, and is involved a lot in NARPM. And so a lot of you know who she is, but we're going to have her on our webinar, and it's going to be a good one.
Well, you really sounded excited about that. I'm sure Deb would be pleased.
Well, go ahead, pump everybody up.
Well, look, Deb, one of the great things about Deb is she's run a property management business before. And so, like, she's just not speaking from, something she learned as a consultant. She's speaking from having experienced it before. And so it's just really powerful when somebody's like done it and then now they're trying to teach it, which is why we're here.
That's right.
We're doing it or have done it and trying to teach it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can go to that link right now. The sign up for that webinar in March should already be up. All right, Matthew, let's talk about this. Let's talk about our book club we got coming up.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. One of the things Spencer and I have, and I know the Dodson crew ran this too, but one of the things that probably made the biggest impact on our growth, especially when we were first getting started, is the book Traction. It talks about the entrepreneurial operating system. And you and I were in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, and we were in a room of property managers. And one of the cool things, this was at a NARPM event, one of the cool things was a third of the property managers were brand new. And so you asked the question, because we were talking about something EOS related, how many of y'all run your business on EOS or Traction? And only about a third of the hands, maybe less than that, maybe like 10 hands went up. Just a very small number relative to the size of the crowd. And that was surprising to both of us because we kind of felt like there were a bunch of property managers that were out there running EOS. But to take another step back, when I was, I can remember riding down the road and having all these ideas and having all these questions that would come up in the business. And I didn't really have what I call a cubby hole to put them in, or a way to process them, or a way to versus just picking up the phone and calling people and every time a problem would pop up. And there was also no way to consistently prioritize problems. And one of the great things about Traction is it just gave us a framework of how to view the business. And once I had the framework, it became very easy to start plugging these things in. And there's like 6 elements to Traction and to EOS. And we kind of use those words interchangeably. Traction is the book, EOS is the system that the book teaches. And so we said, well, why don't we just do a book club? And we know there's a bunch of new people out there that are just getting into property management. And we're just going to go through the book Traction, almost like line by line, and teach how we did it and how we do it, and see if we can't help people implement this, because it made such a huge impact on our business. We thought we would do that. And so we're doing that over the course of 3 weeks. It's weekly, and it starts February 15th. And then we're going to do it the 22nd and the 29th.
All right, so you can sign up for that. We'll be talking about the book Traction. We'll be answering questions as we go through it, but highly recommend you sign up. Also, something else is we have a newsletter.
Oh gosh, they're just signing up for everything, Spencer. Did you think about this before you went through it?
Probably shouldn't have put this in there.
This is
Listen,
like the start of Joe Rogan's podcast here. Is there is
Guys,
Alpha Brains coming up
we
next?
have an hour of signups, and then we'll have 30 minutes of content, everybody.
one more thing to plug here, Matthew. Podcasts that we always we recorded this past year, one a week. Matthew and I are taking just a week or two break, and we're going to start this thing back up. But you can hear us on the podcast, the Evernest Property Management Show.
We also said that with the property management roundtable, that we were going to take a 1 or 2 week break, that ultimately ended up in, now it's been, I guess, 18 months since we did the property management roundtable. And here we are. Now 1 or 2 weeks turned into 18 months.
You're back. All right, let's talk about why we do webinars. Matthew, you want me to take this?
I'm going to be quick so we can get into some content. Really 3 things. We are passionate about developing people. We actually enjoy it. Spencer and I do. The second thing is, anytime, much like NARPM, much like some of the organizations in the industry, anytime you can better the industry, we think it ultimately benefits everybody. We call it the rising tide raises all ships. And then the last thing is, we do buy businesses. And so one day, if you decide to sell your business, we hope you'll give us a call.
All right, that's it. Matthew,
we don't have anything else for them to sign up for?
We don't have anything. We're all out.
All right. Let's get into some intros here. So guys, let me tell y'all, I'm going to start with a story, and then I'll do some intros. As I started going to NARPA events and started going to industry events, one of the things that I found was, when I first started going, I would go and listen to the speakers, and I would learn a lot. Like, when you're really new, you should be in those speakers and learning as much as you can. When you go to NARPM or you go to some other organization related to property management. But as you grow in the organization, and sometimes you've heard some of those same talks before, and maybe you've already implemented them in your organization, what you will find is that a lot of what I call the chats in the corridor, or the conversations outside of the what's going on there. And clearly, like, something's burning down here in Birmingham right behind me, and I'm trying to stay super focused. But the chats in the hallway, the chats in the corridor are some of the most impactful, because what you start to do is you start to develop these relationships, and then all of a sudden you have some of the same problems, and then you're asking people, hey, I've got this problem, how did you solve it? And so that's what happened with me, and that's how I met Duke and Tim and Vince. We were all kind of out in the hallways chatting. We kept pushing that forward, and we started going to dinners, and we started doing more and more things, and it even turned into a mastermind group. And so we'll probably talk a little bit about the mastermind group, but what we decided was, we were kind of going through some of the same things with our organization at the same time. And it was very helpful to walk through that with other people. And so once you were able to learn from each other, and maybe I'd learn something and teach Vince would learn something and teach me. It was just a very powerful mechanism to help us grow our businesses. So today I'm going to go through real quick. Vince is the CEO at Red T Homes. So he was in property management, ran with a bunch of property management companies for a very long time. And now he's into building houses. So we'll get some interesting tidbits from that. Duke and Tim are with Dodson Companies, and Tim is the COO and Duke is the CEO. some of y'all probably remember once we kind of like on the back end of our mastermind group, we even launched a podcast called the Property Management Roundtable. And that went extremely successfully for 6 weeks. And it was just a really fun time. But we couldn't keep it going. We couldn't keep it formalized and keep it going. And so what we said is, well, we'll just do an extension of that when Spencer and I were brainstorming early in the season of what we wanted to do. So guys, welcome to the show.
Couldn't be happier to be here.
We're glad
Always
y'all.
always a pleasure, boys.
Yeah, Duke, I think there's some pantyhose over your camera or something. It's very blurry.
I tried to clean it. I don't know what's going on. Sorry.
He cleaned it by licking his thumb and wiping the mirror. I don't know if that's going to work.
Later in the podcast, Duke's going to tell you about how he's great with technology.
All right, let's kick this thing off.
Go ahead, Spence.
I would, yeah, I'm would love to kind of hear you guys tell a little bit about just kind of your origin story, how you got into property management back when you did. So why don't we kick off with you, Duke? How did you get in the business and why did you get in the business?
Yeah,
And
for me,
then maybe that'll dovetail into Tim, because I know you guys ran together for quite some time.
yeah, I got into the business in 2007. I had purchased 2 or 3 rental properties. I was looking for a property management company to manage my rentals. I couldn't find one that I thought would do the job the way I wanted it done. I was at a period in my life. I was a young person that I knew I needed to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I knew I wanted to start a business at some point, and the stars aligned in 2007. I was like, hey, this is a service that's needed by me and probably others. It's something I think I would like and would enjoy. I love being around real estate and investment real estate specifically. And so I said, hey, it's a business that I could start. You didn't need a bunch of equipment or a bunch of money or a big loan or a land, or like it was lower barriers to entry. I found out why later because it's really hard to do. But but yeah, so that's how I got started. So I said, hey, I'm going to manage my 3 rentals, and I hung my shingle and said, hey, I'm ready to start managing other people's rentals, and started it that way.
What
What
was
did
that?
you,
What
yeah.
what was that like, especially during that time frame? Because Matthew and I were around. We owned rentals in 2007, 2008. How was that starting a business in 2007 at the beginning of the financial crisis we had?
Well, the good news and bad news. The good news was that a lot of folks were upside down on their house, and they would call their realtor and say, "Can you sell my? I lost my job in Richmond. I'm moving to Charlotte or Atlanta or DC. Can you sell my house?" And the realtor said, "Well, you owe. It's worth 250, and you owe 300. You can't sell it unless you want to write a big check. So have you considered renting it?" And so there were a lot more rentals to be managed, like almost overnight. That was the good news. The bad news, as you know, everybody was broke. Nobody had a job, tenants and landlords. So you would get a property that needed 10 grand to work. Landlord couldn't afford it. They needed 1,400 a month in rent, and the market was 1,100, and the tenant could pay 9. Like it was just it was a really challenging time. But I joke about being like Forrest Gump in the shrimp boat. Like there were a lot of rentals to be managed, and we were a management company. Our flag was in the ground, and so if you communicate with tenants well and owners well and did a good job, it was a time where you could grow your business relatively quickly.
And so how did you and Tim get hooked up? When did Tim
Well,
partner up with you?
I had a
So
better segue to that. I had a much better segue. I was going to say pretty much anybody could manage rentals. And so that gets us into Tim.
well, see, I even had a better segue. Was Duke had good news, bad news, and then the best news was super young people who were just graduating from college were broke, as he said, and couldn't find jobs,
And
as he
desperate for
said,
a job.
and desperate for a job. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I graduated college in 2008 from Randolph-Macon College. They're number 8 in the basketball rankings, D3 right now. By the way, go check out my Yellow Jackets. But yeah, got a job right out of college and was laid off, like many people were, just at the very start of 2009. So I was in DC at the time, moved back to Richmond. Was doing odd jobs here and there. Met Duke, and Duke said, "Hey, can you come fill in for about a week while I hire somebody to do this? My intern's leaving, and I need to hire a full-time person." 1 week turned into 3 weeks, and then one day he kind of sheepishly came to my desk and said, "Like, hey, I don't really like anybody else. Do you want to work here for a little while?" And I said, "Sure." And then that was 13 years later that we all got together and now I'm back after a year separation, I guess is what you could call it.
The bait and switch. Duke just kind of warmed you up to the idea of being in property management.
Well, it wasn't a hard threat. It wasn't hard to win his heart, I suppose. But
Yeah.
one lady didn't show up to the interview. I think one person came 3 days early, and so was very confused about it. And then the other person could hardly put a sentence together. So,
So you
uh,
showed up on time and you got the job.
Last
exactly,
man
yeah,
standing.
exactly. So,
Like,
but yeah, I never had a background or anything in property management. I showed up on day one. Duke handed me a phone. I had no idea what I was doing. So I was not in tune enough with what the industry looked like to say no. I was just excited that I was given the opportunity and tried to make the most of it. I hope I did.
yeah, I think you did. Awesome. That's great. All right, Vince, talk about your like how and why you got into the industry back.
So similarly, I was buying houses at the courthouse steps in Riverside County. So I was in Southern California. I was right out of college, market dumped. I was doing oil and gas M&A, and ended up on the courthouse steps in this chaotic uh, wild west of cowboys across the country. I think there was like 100 people across the country showing up to the courthouse steps with cashier's checks. So it was a really good entry. Like I learned a lot quickly, how to underwrite deals, how to do construction, how to open up new markets. What we didn't know how to do well, and this is when I was exposed to the pain of property management, was manage. I think at the time we had 400 single family scattered site homes,
Wow.
and we tried and failed about 4 times to find a good property manager, and said, all right, we're just doing this ourselves. And the technology wasn't as good back then, as you guys know. It was a lot of spreadsheets. It was pretty painful, but that was kind of my entryway in. And it got introduced. That was right when Colony and Blackstone were coming into the space and really scaling scattered site single family rental. I mean, that was the early 2012, 2013. So did that for a number of years, and ended up in San Francisco in 2015. And I was doing some other real estate development and more on the owner operator side prior to that, and was reintroduced to some of the early pioneers in SFR property management, and they were starting a technology company. So Mind, that's when I joined Mind. They were one of the first ones to try and scale PM through building their own tech. And when I connected with the founder there, he said, "Hey, we're starting a property management company. Do you want to get in?" And it's like, what the hell would I want to do that for? But it was a really exciting time to get back in the space, because there's so many there were so many opportunities that we saw at that time, and that it's been really exciting to see a lot of those come to fruition over the last 7 or 8 years now. Still a very fragmented space, as you guys all know. Still very hard. It's not like it got easier, but the bar is raising in the space. And I got introduced. I think it's also important to note. I think Matthew, you said the property management roundtable, which I think that's a professional way to call us. But I do want to call out that we were the Wolf Pack,
That's
and
right.
I like to akin myself to Alan. Somehow I got into this Wolf Pack. Uh, Maybe I roofied them, maybe not, but I was not an owner of a property management company. I was scaling a property management company, and somehow I got in. And these gentlemen have taught me a ton. We were buying a bunch of companies, and that's where Matthew and I really hit it off, and were sharing kind of learnings at the time. And then jumped from that company to I scaled another property management company that wasn't super focused on tech, but we scaled across 8 states, and then we were also an owner operator. So we raised a fund to buy single family rentals. So have seen a lot in the PM space. Although I'm taking a little bit of I wanted to take a little break from property management. I figured construction would be a lot easier. It's not. But we still do manage our own. We have a portfolio that we manage here at Red T. We're also building for institutions who are doing build for rent. So we're still in the PM space, and then I can't get out, so I keep getting pulled back in, and I've invested in a handful of companies adjacent to property management, early stage tech companies that I'm really excited about. So I can't get away from it, and here I am.
Yeah, one of the unique things about Vince is he comes from the institutional side. He's the only one with an oil and gas background on the M&A side, and the rest of us are more Main Street guys. So definitely brings a different lens to view what we're talking about here in the property management business.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mike.
Well, hold on. I actually have a thought here. So I was watching the Golden State Warriors the other night play basketball. And at the end of the first quarter, George Kittle walked in and sat courtside. And so he got like his own standing ovation as he walked in, right? Because the San Francisco 49ers are are playing in the Super Bowl. And I think what Krause said is, I'm going to show up late so that these guys have to like give me my own standing ovation. And so Mike Krause from Atrium Property Management is here joining us. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite. Sorry for the tardiness.
Right.
If you guys could imagine, I was dealing with a fire in property management, as if that never happens to any of those in this business.
Well, if you would listen to me and Spencer's podcast more, we tell you how to solve all those so you don't have them.
Where's the subscribe button? I'd just like to comment real quick on Duke. I'm glad you could get some Vaseline on your camera lens so that you can see us perfect.
I don't know what's going on. I told Tim I think we're in a new office building, and I think the air is real cloudy. I think it's lack of oxygen or something.
All right, Mike, we'll let you go. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the property management business.
All right, buckle up. How long do we have?
1 minute.
So I'll be quick. I got started actually as a maintenance tech back in 2003. So I hit my 20-year mark this past May. I worked for a big company called Aimco, based out of Colorado. I went and actually interviewed for the leasing position, but I asked the HR director hypothetical question about her husband, and it turned out she was a lesbian. So I did not get the job. She said, "What makes you think I have a husband?" And I was like, oh. So she called and she's like, "Hey, you didn't get the leasing job, but you can start out as a maintenance tech. You don't need any skills to do that. You can learn on the job." And I was like, "Oh, that's perfect for me." And anyway, the rest is history. So I was with Aimco for about 5 years, JRK for 6 years after that, and then met my business partner's wife at a bar. We hit it off. He was in small business lending.
To be clear, you hit it off with Adam, not his wife.
Thank you. Yes, hit it off. Yeah, she said, "You got to go to dinner with my husband." We had a blast, and quickly became best friends and decided we wanted to get into business together. And in 2014, we bought Atrium, 228 single family houses at the time. Right now, we manage over 4,000 single family houses and apartments here, Virginia, and Orlando, Florida, Virginia, and up in Ohio. So that's kind of my 30-second elevator Atrium Michael talk.
That's great. That's great. Tim, are you on the sun right now? Like,
yeah, yeah, that's my bad. I'm in the sunroom and I can't figure out whether you want me real dark or real light. Which one do you prefer?
Good, you're good. I'd like to go back to the early days and talk a little bit about, and Matthew, I'll kick it off with you. Since I think a lot of people kind of know your story, you can tell a little bit of your story, how you got into it as well, if you want to, but I'd love to know, like, describe the early days for you in property management. Because I'm imagining a lot of people on the webinar right now are listening to this. Maybe they're in the early stages, or maybe they haven't scaled a property management company, but they want to go there. But what was it like for you early on in those 2008?
So yeah, thanks for that lead in. I got into the business during the Great Recession and owned about 30 homes that I couldn't sell. And so I was moved residents in them and started. Spencer was my first client and took on about 25 or 30 houses that he owned. And, one of the things that I found, and I did this for probably 5 years, until you get to about 300 homes, it's kind of ironic that Mike has it above his head. It's really about hustle. right? It's about, doing all the things that you need to do to get everything done. And, whether it's showing a house, posting rents, like I did everything. And as you're growing a business and as you get to about, 200, 300 doors, you're out there hustling and grinding. And, as you and I talk about it a lot on the podcast, but as you move past that, then it becomes more about instead of property management, it's people management. But from 0 to 300, to me, it's about two things. It's about hustle and it's about great communication, right? Like being able to anticipate what your clients are going to say, being proactive and making sure your clients are consistently in the loop. That's how I kind of think about the early days and how we got started here.
What was going back to the early days, Duke, let me ask you this. What were your biggest struggles? Because you mentioned like, hey, it's an extremely hard business. What were your biggest struggles in the early days?
I think starting off, especially when you're inexperienced, you don't have a lot to offer a client based on someone, in comparison to somebody who's very experienced and has a lot of built-in systems and track record and all that. So what you end up getting is like some of the worst owners and some of the worst properties that require a lot of your time, owners that you don't quite know yet, like where you have to draw the line with a client as far as what they demand of you. Like you'll have a client say, I need you to go, I'm out of town and I need the power on at this property. I need you to go sit at my property from 8 a.m. until noon, right? People would tell you that and you, okay, that's what I have to do. I guess I'm a property manager. And so I think you're pulled in so many directions. It's a very labor intensive business and industry. And so early on, A, where do you draw the line with clients? B, what systems can you create so you don't have to do everything? At first as a small business owner, like you kind of drink your own Kool-Aid and you think you're so awesome that no one else can do it like you can do it. And in reality, I think you have to challenge yourself to figure out why you're good at a particular task, how you can replicate that task with someone else doing it or a software doing it or something automate it in some fashion, and taking the time because you're busy spinning so many plates. You have to take the time to stop and build a system that will replicate that experience over and over again and free your time up. But I mean, you have to work all the time around the clock to get a business off the ground and grow it, and that can never be replaced. Just hard work, but working hard and instead of working smart, not just working hard, I think is pretty important early on.
Is there a point where you like a growth, maybe a certain number, I don't know, where you get to where you can finally say, hey, I don't need these clients anymore. These clients that are eating up all my time, because I think every property manager has that in their business. They have these clients that they maybe got started with. Was there a time when you look back and you're like, hey, I'm going to start cutting some of these relationships off and just deal with the clients that I love?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't as good at that as others, but I remember going to property management conferences and RCOM conferences early on and having somebody like Robert Locke in Atlanta to tell you exactly that. At the end of each year, he would let his employees pick like the 3% or the 5% worst clients, and they would fire them in January. And how much, like the bad ones really do take up a lot of your time. They really do. And you dread the canceling of the contract, you dread the conversation where you finally cancel and they're gone. It's like your life's better, and then you have more time for the good clients, right? The ones that you should be giving your time to.
Yeah.
I used to have so much anxiety during owner statement run, right? It's like, oh, I know this guy's about to call me. And so I had this thing where I would send them out like late in the day so that I could be gone and at least let them settle down overnight. So when we talked in the morning, maybe they were a little more objective.
Hit send and then just turn off the phones.
Turn off the phone, turn off the computer,
Run out of the
and
building.
run out the door and drive away.
Well, Mike, what was the difference for you? I mean, we've heard kind of the stories of some of these guys starting it from scratch. What about buying a property management company, already somewhat of established company? What are the struggles when you go at it that way?
Yeah. So for us, we bought a company that had a really good reputation and name. And it was in Lake Mary, Florida, which is a suburb of Orlando, so small town, basically. And after about 6 months, both my partner and I, Adam, said the next one we buy, we're going to buy one that's run poorly because we were constantly hustling to try and do as good as the founders of the company, right? Roger and Debbie Marty. They had done a great job. All their clients loved them. And it was like, we were never good. So it just took real hustle. I mean, Matthew said it. I think multiple people have said it now. Being willing to do anything for those first clients. And like eventually you have to, like Duke said, systematize things. You have to stop doing anything that the client asks. But up front, we would do anything to not lose a client. In the first year, our churn rate was like less than 1%. We lost one client out of 228 doors, and he went to sell in the first year of business. So you hear all the great customer service stories. Like I think you guys told us to read the book Built from Scratch by the Home Depot guys, and they talk about how they would go if they ran out of a product, they'd go buy it at Lowe's and then deliver it to the house, right? They it was and customer service over everything. And so for us, from kind of that same 228 for us up to 500, it was just me and Adam doing every single thing we could to keep the clients around. So right in line with what Matthew was saying about hustling.
Yeah, you guys did hustle a lot. And I remember the first out-of-state company that we bought was in Nashville. And this property manager was actually getting checks and going and depositing them in his clients' banks, like driving around town. He took a whole day and would drop, and we were like,
and this what like we didn't buy it in 1990. We literally bought it in 2016 when you could ACH the money into the client's account. I was like, you can do this via computer, right?
That was part of my job. That was the one task that Duke really trusted me with, was just driving around town. We really did that same thing until
we did that too. Yeah.
2010, maybe.
Tim, since you were there at the beginning, you guys partnered up. How, like looking back, what are some things that maybe you would have, looking back now, what are some things you could have done differently or improved on in those early days? And I'm just thinking about all these property managers that are listening here. Like, what are some things, like looking back, what could you do better?
Yeah, I mean, I think if your goals are to grow, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is growth mindset and hiring the right people and not being so desperate to hire someone that you make a mistake on who you hire, right? I think we all, Kraus that was putting out a fire today, right? We're all so wrapped up in the day-to-day operations of things, putting out fires, running to the client's house to sit for the utility company, for as Duke was saying, all these different things, running checks, all that stuff. And then we forget the most important thing, which is the people you're bringing into your organization. So I think a couple of times very early on, we were so desperate to hire somebody super duper quickly that we made some wrong hires, and it sets you back so far. It sets you back months, years sometimes. And not to say that we're perfect at it now, because we're absolutely not. But I think we're a little bit we're slower to hire, faster to fire, which I think is something we always talked about as a group in our masterminds as well. So I think for me, just the foundation of the business, making sure that it's strong, and that comes back to the people, is the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah, and then I think spending a lot more time vetting vendors when we were really young, and making sure that we had control over the maintenance process, because that's the thing that you can spend so much time on, spin your wheels on, and then everybody comes out unhappy. The tenant, the vendor, the landlord. Those are the two things that really come to mind that early on we could have done a lot better, is vetting vendors and controlling the maintenance process, and then the people.
Good stuff. Vince, what do you think are kind of unique challenges to a property management company as they want to scale? You've been a part of scaling property management companies. What are some of the unique challenges that they face? Anyone out there that really wants to grow and see some success that way?
Yeah, and I don't think it's unique to even just property management. I think just in general, there's a lot of noise and distraction. I mean, I'm dealing with it right now, trying to scale our company. Sometimes with a lot of new innovative technology and new processes that are coming out, you forget some of the basics. I keep trying to focus back to keep it simple, as simple as you can. And I think maybe it was Kraus, you just touched on customer service. At the end of the day, you really have to focus on your customer. And with scale, it is really easy to get distracted. And glass balls versus rubber balls is what I keep telling my team right now, is we have a lot of balls in the air. Which one's rubber, which one's glass? Like, what can't we drop? And we can't drop customer service. And I think a lot of times, I'm guilty of it often. I juggle the rubber balls that aren't super critical sometimes. And it's easy to drop the glass ball there. So I'd say noise, focusing on keeping it simple, and as simple as it can be. It's easy to say that, but um, also with the macroeconomic climate, this ties into noise. I think you can latch onto things you can't control. So focus on what you could control. So we can control how good we show up. We can control how we're servicing our clients. We can't control what interest rates are going to do tomorrow. We can't control what, I think there was a lot of worry in the PM space when consolidation was happening. And I'd hear it all the time, like, oh my gosh, these big players are going to take over the industry. And there was panic. And I think you saw some folks sell during that time, when in reality, it was just kind of noise. I mean, there's room for all of us in the space. And there's people that lost sight of what they really should be focused on, which is just running a good business that provides great customer service.
Yeah, I read a book recently by Steve Jobs, like #1 advertising guy, and he just kept coming back. The kind of the theme in the book was Steve Jobs he would always talk about hitting something with with a simple stick. It was like simplify, simplify, simplify. And so they'd come with a really kind of complicated product, and he would just throw it in the trash and say, you got to make this more simple. So really interesting. All right, Matthew, what about you? What are your kind of takeaways as far as challenges for smaller property management companies wanting to scale or trying to scale? What do you think are the biggest challenges right now?
Yeah, you and I talk a lot about this. So you go from being like a great property manager, which I was talking about with all the hustling, to having to manage people. And that's just a very like different skill set. And so as you grow the organization, you're not managing properties, you're managing people. And so learning to do that. And then you and I have done a podcast or two about how then you go from being a property manager to a people manager to a people leader as you grow and scale the business. So I think that's like challenge #1. Challenge #2, similar to what Vince said, is just prioritization, right? There's just a lot of competing priorities, and just making sure that there's a great book out there called The One Thing, which Gary Keller, who started Keller Williams, wrote, and he just talks about high leverage activities. And as you grow the organization, you go from being, very much hustling to being, you need to think more, like Duke said, work smarter, not harder. As you grow the organization, that becomes more and more important, just because what you've got to start doing is thinking about leverage versus you doing everything, and how can you get things done through other people. So again, that kind of goes back to the skill set of management and leadership. But growing an organization at some point, and I think if I was a property manager and just getting started, I would kind of decide, what type of business do I want? Do I want to grow an organization where I have a bunch of people to lead and those people are managing the homes? Or do I want to grow a boutique property management company and have just a few people to manage, but then just sit really close to my owners and be very helpful to them? And both of those answers are right. Like, it's really what's right for you. Some people just want to have a really great lifestyle business, and some people want to be crazy like us and grow these big organizations. But the thing I think is important is just being intentional, because for some people, bigger is not always better. And in this world of property management, like when you go to some of these some of these events, for some reason, a proxy for how good of a property manager you are is how big of a property manager you are, and that's not always the case.
Agreed. All right, we got a question. Let's hit this question right here. Freddie asked this. I'd love to know what your greatest pain points are for your property managers with tenants. Is it communication, maintenance calls, pushing orders through, timing, quality? Where are they and what are the specific examples? So
why don't you start with that?
So it's a great question, Freddie. The problems that actually get to my desk are different than they were back in the day. I would say, security deposits has never been an easy process. I think, communication helps a lot, being upfront, providing information, more information, the better to the resident. Problems that I deal with nowadays, like lawsuits. It's a real big problem, especially in Florida, where if you listen to the radio, literally every single commercial break has another, attorney and that's trying to sue people for slip and falls and accidents and everything under the sun. So I'd say those problems are they're just time consuming, and just if you can avoid them, we avoid them at all costs. Yeah, I mean, the same stuff that we're dealing with today, everybody had to deal with back in the day. So for example, like a work order, right? Your garbage disposal goes out. Back before tech existed and we had fancy, apps, it was the same thing, right? Communication's a little easier now. But that's, we also have a lot more transparency with our owners and a lot more communication with our owners, because you can hop on a Zoom call and meet them face to face, even though they're in California. And so with the technology, new challenges arise, right? So for me, in my world, it's about, I think it was Matthew talking about, like, time blocking and being able to set time aside on your schedule and actually keeping some of that time for yourself to work on your business. It's so hard because you can fill up every second of your calendar today, with meetings and conversations, and you have to learn to prioritize your time too.
Awesome. Great answer. Tim, what about you? Thinking back to your time with your property managers when they were dealing with tenants, what are the biggest pain points?
Well, I'm back to dealing with them a little bit myself right now. So I'm managing a lot of my own stuff and some stuff directly for some other people while I'm doing it. So I've actually got some direct experience with this over the last few months. I'll tell you what, it's really hard from top to bottom. It is really, really hard. But one of the things is, I think this industry, since we started back in, Duke started in 2007, I started 2009, a lot of manual processes. We've evolved so much over the last 14 years to a place where we're trying to automate everything. We're trying to automate everything. Yet people still want to chat with us. So how do you, it's a juxtaposition that has got really no great answer. People sometimes just want to call you. They want to have that conversation because it's the place that they live has a problem. And we have set up so many systems to automate things where they're just shooting a work order into our sponsor AppFolio's maintenance system, right? Or Property Meld, or one of our automated systems, or our phone trees, or that we have AI that's picking up now. And sometimes they just want to talk to a person. So our systems not being set up for our tenants sometimes is difficult. Now, if you're going to scale your business, you simply can't answer every phone call, right? If you have 150 properties under management and you're the only one running them, you're physically not able to pick up any phone calls. So you have to set up these systems. So I think it's just the one-off situation where somebody just desperately wants to talk to you to feel better, and finding the time to do that because our systems simply aren't set up that way for the most part. And the industry continues to go that direction. So I think that's pretty difficult. So just going back to the communication piece and how you set up your systems, how you make time for people, because it really, no matter how big you get as a company, whether you're 100 units or 14,000, it's still a personal business because it's the place where people live.
I gotta admit, I didn't have juxtaposition on my bingo card today, so appreciate you working that in, Tim.
I've got 4 more that I'm trying to work in, so I don't know what's Spencer's.
I can barely even say it, being from Alabama.
Well, Alabama, you beat me to the Alabama joke there too.
Great, some good questions in the chat box there.
Can I just say one thing, just to put a bow on like tenant problems? One of the things that we're seeing, and this is more of like maybe a more recent trend, is leasing is slowing down relative to what it has been in the past. And so one of our big friction points right now, and the thing that we're talking about internally a lot is, hey, leasing feels like, it just feels like, and some of the data is starting to represent that we're not able to lease homes as fast, and days on market are starting to creep up into numbers that we haven't seen, frankly, in years. And we're trying to figure out, well, why is that? Did COVID pull a lot of that forward? That's probably some of it. So that's one of our big internal challenges right now. If that's helpful.
Matthew, can I ask a question? Sorry, I know Spencer, you're in charge. Am I allowed to do that?
Go for it.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that is a pricing issue that owners are coming in and they've made investments in which they expect a certain over the last 3 to 4 years in which they expect a certain return. And so we can't drop prices as property managers when we really know that rents are actually regressing, even if only slightly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you've nailed it, right? Like if you underwrote a home at a certain price, yeah, it's amazing what 50 or $100 will do to that return, especially when you talk about like on the institutional side of the business, they're
Mm-hmm.
very slow to drop prices. But even the retail clients are, right? Like everybody's kind of been in this environment for a long time where rents have just consistently gone up and up and up. Like they were going up as much as 10% at one point, maybe higher in some markets like Austin, Vegas, some of the hotter Denver, some of the hotter markets. And now, if they're leveling, even if they're just leveling out and they're not keeping on that track, then people are frustrated because they had the rent increases built into their return profile. So you nailed it. That's part of it is just people's unwillingness. And so that's one of the things we're doing right now is I actually worked on that literally almost before this is trying to get the data to show our owners that the market has slowed down and that they're going to have to adjust their expectations to meet the new market. And if they decide to keep their prices really high, then they're just not going to rent it because whoever adjusts to the market first is going to be the one that leases the next house.
That's good. Thank you. Because I have to put a property on the market tomorrow.
All right. All right. Let's answer this question. Jason asked this: what prop tech have you added in the last year or two that has had the most positive impact? Any you have not added, but yet are excited about? This kind of prop tech's your world. Why don't you tell us anything that you've been excited about that you've seen in the industry, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think just the increased focus on repairs and maintenance and how to make that process better for the owners and the residents. You're seeing you're seeing new product come in, but also older product get better. I don't know if I should be plugging a bunch of companies in here. Maybe the guys who are using them could be plugging
You
companies.
plug
But
away. That's what we do.
One
Shamelessly
go
plug
ahead.
people here. We just like to be liked in the industry, so we'll just shamelessly say people's names so that they like it.
Yeah, I mean, I've loved to see what Property Meld has continued to do with their data. Ray's done a good job over there. I will say, going back to a question, this kind of ties into the prop tech answer here. I think one of the challenges that I've seen consistently is communication, but we are the middleman. The property manager is the middleman. So choosing the owners that you bring on to manage for is critical because the resident looks at you as the manager as the responsible person all the time. And for us as managers, we can only do so much. Like we can only tell an owner, you need to fix X, Y, and Z. You need to take care of your property. If they don't listen, it falls back onto the manager a lot of times. And informing your owners through data and information of why it's important for them to take care of their properties, to take care of their owners, or to take care of their residents, decreases days on market, gets them better rents, etc. So I wanted to latch back to that because I think repairs and maintenance is a big portion of that problem. So I plugged Meld just because I liked what they're doing right now. I'm working with a company called Boom. They're doing credit reporting and also tenant screening right now. So focusing on the resident experience. What are we providing our residents besides just managing their property and collecting their money? So there's been a ton that have come out in the resident arena. You guys can parlay on that a bit more, maybe with some ones that you're actively working on.
Duke, what have you seen that you've been excited about from a prop tech?
I'm a year and a half removed, so my answers will seem dated. I'd rather pass it to Matthew, or someone else, or Mike that wants to answer it.
Well, I'll tell a quick story that'll relate to you. So we one of the things we used to do with our mastermind is we would have monthly calls. So the calls would look just like this, and we would just sit around and ask each other questions and BS to some degree. And Duke actually invited this guy named Steve to one of our calls, and I was like mildly frustrated that that we had this like this kind of like mastermind group, and then Duke had the nerve to invite Steve to the call.
I think
But
you're pretty openly frustrated about it.
well, not at the time. I mean,
Okay.
I just turned my camera off and I'm just kidding. Uh, but he was pitching his new business, and it was an application underwriting business. And it was a not a fintech, but definitely a tech company, and they were using all sorts of neat widgets to help make that underwriting process smoother. But ironically, after we hung up, I connected with him, and at the time, and a lot of you have heard me tell this story, I was about uh, 4 days behind on all of our applications, and just shared with him where we were and the dumpster fire that it was. And many of y'all know the answer to the story, but Steve is the founder of a company called Findigs that has absolutely, not only were they great 3 or 4 years ago, but they've continued to get better and better. And one of the big challenges, this is going back to the leasing, one of the big challenges that we're starting to have in the industry, and I'm sure a lot of y'all are experiencing it, is just fraud around documentation. And so Steve's technology is able to identify fraud and make sure that somebody that submits fake pay stubs or something fake gets identified, and it ironically even has like a signature on it on that document that they can pick up, and they know where the document even came from, like what online site. And so, just been really happy with Findigs and how they've helped us get better and better with our underwriting and better with our residents that are moving in.
I will say, Matthew, on that point, like what I've really noticed just from observing from afar the last year is just the current technology out there. Like you spoke on Findigs. I mean, the things that they're layering on so quickly is pretty incredible. So I've been more impressed with existing companies over the last year, that even Appfolio, I mean, Appfolio has done a tremendous job staying, listening to their clients. And I will have to throw out the buzzword AI. Like, I mean, it is real and it's being layered into every aspect of our business. And existing companies, software companies, are really leaning into that heavily. Another one that I'd recommend you all look at is Elise. It's called Elise AI. They're a leasing platform that's pretty. They were heavily focused in multifamily, but now they're getting into single family. So,
and they've actually expanded their offering. They started with leasing, and they do that pretty well. And I think I don't know if they're public about it, but they do it for some really big brand names. But they're also doing it now on the collections side. And I think on the roadmap, they have some other things that they're trying to get into that basically just, chat bots and being able to diagnose certain problems and or have the right responses so that you can manage more with less. So we're good friends with the Elise AI folks. They've been really kind, and we've looked at and are considering their product for Evernest.
Awesome. Matthew, can you hit done with that question?
Sorry about that.
I got an answer.
Go.
Yeah, speaking about AI, it's a buzzword. Everybody's talking about it. First of all, we use Chat GPT all the time to do like answers to emails, like owner emails that used to take a half hour to formulate and make look pretty. You can now do much quicker by just typing your subject matter in and saying how long you want it to be and whatnot. But we started using Colleen for rent collections on one of our portfolios, and it was super awesome. It's tedious sending out late letters, and Colleen can handle, 500 conversations at once when, most people can only handle one. So highly recommend that. And then just a simple little link. You guys probably all know this. I might be the last person in the world to know it, but one of the things it's in single family rentals, it's hypersensitive per like each zip code and market. Zillow actually offers a little tool that's free on their website to do market trends, and it's real-time data. It's like 2 days old or something like that, and you can just type in a zip code, and I'll put it in the chat box so everybody can see it. But really easy to just access. and put in your zip code and find out what's happened to the rents over the last 30, 60, 90 days. So
Awesome.
really cool little tool.
Great sharing. Thanks for sharing all that. For the panel, I think this one's live already. Can people see it?
It is. Yeah.
What percentage of your company's growth in general would you attribute to organic growth versus growth as a result of partnerships or acquisitions? Matthew?
Yeah. So ours is about a third of, well, yeah, probably, yeah, close to a third. Just organic retail. A third of our business is organic retail that we've organically grown. About a third of our business is institutions that we've gotten organically, and it's probably a little less than a third actually for institutions, but in general. And then the last third have come, and maybe a little bit more. So maybe it's more like 30 and 40%. And I know that doesn't add up to 100%. Have come from acquisitions.
Yeah.
It's Alabama math right there.
Yeah, I mean it adds up to like 103%.
Or
What we get around here, that's hustle, 103%.
Duke, I'd be interested in what yours was back before you graciously sold to Evernest or merged with Evernest.
Yeah, Tim, I was going to guess, Tim, do you know these numbers or organic versus acquisition?
Yeah, you guess, and I'll see how close you are.
For the first 3 to 5 years, it was all organic. I think it was a while before we bought our first company. We bought about 11 companies over the course of the next 10 years. And I'm just doing the math in my head. It would probably be 60 to 70% organic and the rest acquisition, something like that.
That is exactly correct.
And Mike, you
if he wasn't signing your paycheck, would you have said he was correct? Like, is he really correct?
He's supposed to be paying me for this? No, that really was correct. Yes, it was. I mean, we a lot of the companies we bought were smaller, and we had a pretty darn good sales machine, especially in our Richmond market. And then we did HOA towards the end the last 5 years, and that was a lot of organic growth, a ton of organic growth. That was probably in the 80% organic versus 20% purchased.
What about y'all, Kraus?
Yeah, you started with acquisition, but I know you guys hustled a ton out there.
Yeah,
bringing on doors. What's your mix look like?
It's probably honestly like when it comes down to it, probably 50-50. I mean, it's tough because churn muddies the water, right? Like, we probably churn more of our acquisition clients than we do our organic growth clients. And once you get to 1,000 units, it gets really hard just to keep up with churn, right? Because if you're at a normal churn rate, 15 to 20%, something along those lines, you have to add 150 doors organically or 200 doors organically to just keep up. Yeah. So this year, I'm proud to report, this is our first year of positive organic growth in like 5 years back. So Jessica Foster, our business development manager, got into 200 living rooms this year plus, and gave 200 personal individual pitches to potential owners, single family homes. And so first year of positive organic growth, which I was pretty excited about. It gets tougher as you grow, but probably 50-50. I mean, that's a cop-out answer, but
yeah, we don't really experience churn over here, so we don't really know what that is.
Phil asked a question about, have you noticed a slowdown in new leads? I don't know, like Duke, you said, is it tenant leads? And yes.
Mike, you've got to close out the answer there so we can answer the next question.
Yeah, you guys are like messing in my question box.
Y'all can't be driving these questions.
Oh, no, y'all don't start typing your answers out. We're trying to do this for everybody's benefit.
Yeah.
With this group, there's no chance we're going to get through all these questions.
I'm telling you. I don't even know where I was.
I was trying to get ahead of my homework here. I was trying to get some questions out of the way. So
y'all are just starting to type answers out here?
Yeah.
They are.
Everybody's wanting to know all the vendors.
We want to help. We want to help these people.
Yeah. Let me ask you this.
This was the way the property management roundtable started going off the rails. It was just like
Duke is supposed to be answering. Brandon has a question. How did you effectively transition away from being the guy your owners and clients talk to? Most of my owners are so accustomed to getting me on the phone to talk about projects like turnovers, getting another property manager or property on the market, thinking of how an owner will take me handing them off to the next key hire.
I'm really want to answer this one because I think it's important. And so what Matthew said earlier about deciding what kind of business do you want to have, you need to decide it and then you need to stick to a plan. So what that means is, do you really want to be a one person shop and do you want everybody to call you? And some of that you got to understand is ego. Like you think you're awesome and people validate that by saying thank you and calling you and you're their guy and they call you Saturday at 4 p.m. and Tuesday at 8 p.m. and is that what you want? Is that the life you want? If so, great, do that. Be a one person shop and maybe charge more fees and you're profitable but small and that's great. But if you want to go from being a one person shop to a 3 or 5 or 10 person shop, you have to get over the fact that you have to get over that I'm the guy thing and you have to create systems. And so what people really want, they really don't want you. They don't want Duke Dodson or Matthew Whitaker. They want the experience that you've been providing them. And what does that mean? Right? You're responsive, you answer their questions. If you don't know, you find out and get back to them. They trust you. You're reliable. All of those things, right? And almost in property management, it's not rocket science. It's not neurosurgery. Like anything you're doing can be done by someone else. What's the experience you're providing? List it out. What traits does a human have to provide that experience? List it out. That's now your job description. And you can hire, like you think I'm 45 years old, I'm 60 years old, I've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. A 25-year-old kid can't do that. They can't do everything you can do, but they can do about 80% of it really well if you hire the right person and train them and then delegate properly, right? Don't just throw the phone to Tim on day one like I did. Delegate properly. So what does that mean? Train the person well. Look over their shoulder. On day one, they watch you do it. After they watch you do it a while, then you watch them do it. Once you're comfortable, then you back off and you let them do it on their own, but you spot check them. And then once they're doing it consistently, then you can back off and make sure that client doesn't feel like you're tossing them to the kid who's 25 years old. What you're doing is you're slowly handing them off until they're comfortable, and you check in with the client. How's it going? How's Derek doing? How's Fred doing? How's Joe doing? And then if you get good feedback, great, you can delegate and move away faster. If you don't get good feedback, then stay with them longer. Make sure until they're ready and make sure they're the right person, and then you can pass that off. So anything in this business can be passed off. And if you want to grow a big business, you have to. You just need to do it correctly.
Great answer. Tim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just to back up Duke's point about like the ego piece, I was lucky enough to be involved in somewhere around 40 acquisitions between Dodson and Evernet. And every single one of those owners said, "Oh, you're going to have to do it this way because all my clients just love me, and I do it perfect and all that." And you know what? I bet you that 40% of your clients don't really like you that much. So don't be afraid to do it, and don't be afraid that somebody might be able to do it a little bit better than you. Right? The next person might be doing it better than you are. All those things Duke said is right in terms of training and everything. You hand it off to somebody and they may be developing even more trust and a better relationship with that person. So definitely do it the right way, but don't fear giving it up and fear somebody doing it better.
I do have some bad news for Brandon. I still have owners call me all the time, and I manage 14,000 homes, and I still have owners that have my cell number. I still get emails from frustrated owners because you can just figure out what my email is based on what everybody else's email is. So Brandon, everything's right, and as you what we call delegate and elevate, there's no doubt, but you're never going to get away from it, and frankly, you don't want to, right? You want to be kind of connected to what's going on. The last thing, just to put a bow on it, to double click on what Tim said, and I'm not saying it because he's here. I'm saying it because it's absolutely true. Blake Webb is one of our team members, and like absolutely, when you hire awesome people, these owners will be like, "Don't give me Matthew, give me Blake. Matthew may be in charge, but Blake knows what the hell's going on." And that's the way I think about it, is get people that the owner's frustrated that they have to talk to you instead of getting with Blake that actually gets crap done.
I got another bow. Got another bow.
Tie another bow.
Tie another bow. I was sat next to Matthew's table. I just get around people who are smarter than me and then learn from them. And the first broker owner conference that I went to, Matthew's team recommended the book Who Not How. Real good book on how to find the right people. And then my advice is just do it. Just give it to somebody else. and rip that Band-Aid off. And then all of a sudden, like you won't get nearly as many calls as you think you will. And then, it's off your plate. It's like 95% of that weight is off of your shoulder. So just do it. Rip the Band-Aid off.
So for clarity, it's who solving your number one problem. That's the book I think Mike was talking about. But there is also a great book called Who Not How, which
Yes,
is
you're right. You're right.
is a
Absolutely. Yeah, you're
fantastic book.
absolutely right.
Both of them will help you solve the same problem.
That's right.
Yes, but you're right. You clarify that actually perfectly.
I did say they'll make them solve the problem, like right there.
Matthew's read each of those books 7 times on fast on his
I
headphones.
have.
Yeah, on
I
mobile.
have
2x.
I have absolutely read them multiple times. All right. Duke, you're gonna have to mark off that question because it won't let us answer the next question until
Mark
you.
that one off. Brandon's. There we go. All right. Speaking of legal issues, when do you start to feel good about writing a settlement check when there was
Never.
no fault?
All right.
I find myself digging my heels in over principle, yet it sucks the life out of me.
There ain't no winning in this business. You can't win. And so don't try, right? Make the best decision. Don't spend 3 times as much of your energy and time and emotion trying to win this thing when you can just write a small check, right? If it's a big one, maybe think about it. But we always fight that as we always want to win. We always want to prove we're right, and don't try to do that, right? I mean, if the right decision for your business is to write a check and you can afford it, then do it and move on to the next big issue that you're going to have.
I'll say this, like we decided to dig our heels in one time on a big issue, and we won, and it cost us $25,000. Huge win there, right? So we try to settle everything as much as humanly possible. I would love to be like Disney and fight every single lawsuit and never back down, but it's just not worth it. Just move on. Settle.
I sued somebody for 50 grand one time and won, and my almost to the penny, my attorney's fees added up to 50 grand. And just thinking about the brain damage of it was 12 months, like it was so bad. And you also think about it a lot. And so it's not just the money or the time, it's also the brain damage. Now I will do one caveat. I believe in fighting things that I'll say on principle that are kind of like core to your business. So, if an employee says, "Oh, well, you fired me because of XYZ," that's the type of thing I'll go to the OK Corral over, just because there's number one, I don't want that spreading to other people within the organization. And because who we are with our team members is so core to the like making this thing work. So I'm willing to fight that to protect my reputation. So that's one place that I will spend money to fight.
Good stuff. All right. We sometimes struggle with keeping up with owner communication, routine updates, CapEx, cash calls, etc. What are some tips, tricks, tools that you like to use in this arena?
Not everybody at once. Vince, you got something?
So
No, I was looking back at the question. I missed which one he said here. Which one are you talking about?
You were playing
from Derek. Just struggling with owner communication. What are some tips, tricks, tools that you like to use in this arena?
We have a guarantee at Atrium that we'll call you back within 24 hours, or your month's management fee is free. It hasn't been the best guarantee in terms. We've only had to pay it a few times. We don't push it much, I guess, is the real thing. We don't tout that. But we've lived by that philosophy since day one. And the number of times that I've driven through my neighborhood, just making 2, 3, 4 more phone calls, my neighbors in my old neighborhood must have thought I was crazy, because I would loop that neighborhood 8, 9 times, and then I'd pull into my driveway finally when I finished up the phone calls that I needed to make. And I'm just praying I get somebody's voicemail instead of having to talk to them at 7 p.m. But anyway, you just have to be intentional about it. It has to become a non-negotiable to get back to people. Unless you're Matthew, then you don't have that same rule.
No, we absolutely have that rule.
Well, your people do, yeah.
I think it depends on what kind of owner you're talking about. It seems like maybe you're talking about larger owners with multiple properties here. For us at Dodson, what we would do there is it all starts with expectation setting during the sales process and setting up consistent communication check-ins. So as we're bringing on a customer, or even if they had gotten down the line, they gotten started with 2 properties and then suddenly they buy a bunch and it's 15 monthly check-ins. So they know that they're going to get a very consistent call every single month from you. So they don't have to pester you throughout the month to answer a question here, answer a question there. So scheduling calls on the 20th of the month with your biggest 3 clients, scheduling another set of calls on the 22nd with your next 3 biggest clients. Being very consistent, somebody said intentional, I think, with the communication, I think is really important. But just start out with good, consistent communication up front. What are you going to do? And then hold you and your staff to it. And I think putting those things on your calendar early and making sure they know when you're going to get in touch with you is extremely important.
Yeah, I echo all that. I mean, standardization comes to mind for me. I mean, the more as you scale, the more custom processes you have for owners, the higher probability that you're going to drop the ball or not meet expectations. So it's easier said than done to say, we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it the Evernest way, or we don't bring you on. It's easy to just grow and take on clients who may have unrealistic asks, but the more that you could standardize, the better.
And I would say, like, if you get a question or a problem that happens once, just call the owner and deal with it. If that same problem occurs 3 times, 5 times, 10 times a month, for example, across your portfolio, then it's a consistent problem that you can try to get ahead of with a system. The system might be when you onboard, like, I'll give you an example, like you pay owners on the 7th and that this owner doesn't get paid because the rent wasn't paid, right? So what are they going to do? They're going to call you and they're going to say, why didn't I get paid? Why did my tenant pay the rent? Are you calling the tenant? What are you doing? What's the process for eviction? Like, you're going to get that question. That's a question you're going to get 5, 10, 20 times a month as you grow. So why not get ahead of it with a system? One system might be when your owner payments go out on the 7th, they get an email that says, if you didn't get paid, it's because your tenant didn't pay, and here's what we're doing. That won't stop every problem, every question. It'll stop a lot of them. So what else can you do? Maybe on your owner onboarding, you get ahead of that. Like, look, Mr. Owner, we collect rent 1st through the 5th. We disperse on the 7th. If your tenant doesn't pay, rest assured, you don't need to call us. We're going to do these things for you. And again, some of them are still going to call you, but if you cut out 80% of your owner calls by some kind of system, you're going to make your staff's life so much easier. And the owners are they're not calling because they know what's going on. That's all they really want to know. They want to know, are you on it? Are you doing everything possible? And what's in it for me? What happens to me?
We've actually thought a lot about this, mostly because I'm tired of Duke calling me mad as hell. And we've thought about communication a lot. And, communication is actually a symptom of something deeper. And when we kind of like peeled the onion back, and they've hit on it here, it is actually a lack of trust, right? What does communication indicate is generally a lack of trust. What we found is anytime you can, so what you've got to consistently do is build trust deposits with your owners. A smaller owner takes way less trust deposits. A bigger owner takes way more trust deposits. And so when Duke mentions proactive communications, or Tim talks about having a monthly call, really what you're doing is you're building in systems that are creating trust with the owner. And what'll actually happen is once you start to build that trust and make those trust deposits, the owner actually requires less communication because they just know that you're doing the right thing. So when I would think about communication now, everybody, is I would be very focused on, hey, how can we consistently build trust? What are some mechanisms we can increase trust with our clients? And then that'll actually decrease communication. It may mean that on the front end, you do a lot of communicating, like you over communicate. And at some point, there's like mercy, like just do it and only call me if such and so happens.
All right, good answer. All right, we have this one from Hank, who says, and we're coming up on our time here, so we're going to answer just a couple more. Hank says, we struggle with year-end financial items, getting budgets to all the owners, end of year tax info, etc. Are you guys doing this in-house or third party? Mike, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, Hank, you're probably talking about larger owners or multifamily. When you're talking about budgets, I would assume. We get started on our budgets super early. We started with a manager budget boot camp back in August of this year. So just get started early. Have a good template. We do it in house. We don't do any third party. And then have regular meetings. Send it out early, even in its preliminary stages, and say, hey, here, happy to receive some feedback. Some stuff you can put on ownership groups. We actually ask our owners to tell us what they believe the taxes are going to be. And same thing goes for insurance. So put some of it back on them unless you handle that for them, which most times you don't. So hopefully that helps, but just get started as early as possible.
Spencer, one thing that a lot of these questions have is we named a bunch of vendors really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So after this, can we just include that in the newsletter? If you'll sign up for the newsletter, can we include all the vendors that we mentioned in here?
We'll put everybody here on the newsletter, and we'll send them those
Just
vendors.
put everybody here's cell phone and email, and let everybody call and get the vendors for themselves. Kidding.
We will definitely do that. All right. How about this? Goran asked this: profit share or stock options for staff as retention technique? Question mark. Who wants to tackle this?
I could touch on it because I've been involved in two different programs. I mean, granted, the companies were capitalized differently. I think so the last company I was at, we did an employee ownership program. So each year we would sell shares to anyone in the company. So we would dedicate a certain amount of shares that we would sell to individuals in the company based on our most recent valuation. And those shares we pay out a distribution on annually based on profitability. It's an amazing technique to roll out for retention, and it helps everyone drive towards the same goal. It is a bit complicated to roll out, and depending on your ownership structure, if you're a single owner, it's a little bit easier, but if you have partners or other shareholders or investors, it gets a little more complicated. So my only advice on that piece is, again, I said it earlier in this podcast, the simpler you could make it, the better. I've been involved in some very complicated ownership programs that sound great, and that actually kind of backfires on employees because you give them ownership and they don't know what they have ownership in, and sometimes their expectations are higher than reality. And then when those expectations don't come to fruition, you're kind of the bad guy.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of unique structures you can roll out, and they're great retention tools.
I think something interesting, maybe Mike, you could hit on this, and I don't know if this is something you all were thinking intentionally about it, but I know that you have some employees, Mike, that are like partners in investment properties with you all. Is that something? Can you talk a little bit about that as a retention?
Yeah, when we do acquisitions of multifamily buildings, we do allow employees to get involved and invest, and we recommend it and ask them for that. And we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15, 16 team members join in and invest money in deals. Kind of cool. Our administrative assistant for the office, who's our receptionist, actually, she's super excited. She was involved in the purchase of the office here. And so she's so excited to own her desk. She's like, this is my area. This is my percentage right
And
here.
she makes sure the rent gets paid every month too.
There you go. And then we make sure the deal does that. But yeah, we have profit sharing at higher levels, and we don't do any stock at this point though.
Anybody else want to take that one on?
I do. I want to hop back to a question because actually Deb Newell, who's on this call, thank you, Deb, for the reminder. She gives me credit for this, but she's actually the one who taught me. But we do a quarterly owner call where we just have a live, market update, what's going on in Orlando, what's going on in our markets, and then send it out to all of our single family and small boutique multifamily owners. And just offer them a chance to get on and actually talk to me or Adam, whoever's running the call, the owners of the company, to keep that communication open and out there. So it's Deb credits me, but she actually reminded me that we used to do this or something, so we started it back up a couple of years ago, and we love it.
Can I close the loop on the whole equity thing? It is something we have dug very deeply in, and I will tell you, the more you dig, it is infinitely complicated. Just for the same reason Vince talked about, like there's all sorts of tax implications for your team members, and so my suggestion would be to absolutely hire somebody that like an attorney that's done that before, just so, because the worst thing you can do is like get started down a path and then realize, oh crap, like that's the wrong thing, and then need to like pull back and do something else. So make sure that this is really one that's a one-way door. Jeff Bezos calls a two-way door is a door you can go in and then come back. A one-way door is a door you can't come back. And so, in my opinion, the equity piece is definitely a one-way door. So make sure that you have somebody that knows what they're doing that'll help you with. Can I jump on to Jennifer's question? Because I think it's important. Jennifer asked, a few of you recommended Appfolio. Does Upkeep work with Appfolio? I thought they did similar things. Do you prefer Appfolio or accounting over QuickBooks? So I'll jump in here. Obviously, Appfolio is a sponsor, so the last thing I'm going to do is say something bad about them. But in all seriousness, I think all of us used Appfolio with our businesses. So all have we've had some like really good experience with it. One of the things, and I think Vince mentioned it around the tech question, is Appfolio is starting to add what they call their stack, which is allowing it to integrate with some other software. So that's something really exciting. I guess we did manage on QuickBooks very early. So Jennifer, not having the context of your business, but I would tell you, if your business gets more than about 10 or 20 homes, you absolutely should switch to Appfolio or some purpose-driven property accounting software, because it'll make a big difference. Now, you'll have to still keep QuickBooks because QuickBooks, we call it the corporate books, your company's profit and loss. But that property accounting definitely should be done on a purpose-driven software once you get to I would say 10 to 20 homes. All right, I'm going to let y'all finish with Laura's question.
Yeah, sorry. Last question.
We'll go around the horn. Laura, who also is an awesome team member, everybody. Where have you found the most success in growing your business and expanding your markets? Kraus, why don't you kick us off, and then we'll go to Tim and Duke, and then Vince.
So our core focus at Atrium is creating meaningful relationships, and our entire business has been built on relationships. In multifamily and boutique multifamily, we found the most success in like befriending and getting close with brokers, the people who are selling those properties. In single family, when we were hustling and in living rooms ourselves, it was all realtors and making friends with realtors. When it comes to acquisitions, which every single person on this call has a lot of experience with, long-term relationships, right? I never walked up to somebody and was like, I want to buy your company. It started with a friendship or a relationship, a professional relationship first, and ultimately led to an acquisition or merger.
Yeah, a couple questions I would ask, when you're trying to grow your business. First is, where's my potential client when they decide they need me, and how do I get in front of them? And so as Michael said, like for 2007 through 2012, for example, for us, that was mostly realtors as well. Your potential client said, I can't sell my house. I need to rent it. I might need to hire a property manager. What's a property manager? Who do I call? And then the realtor was already in their living room at the time saying, hey, you're upside down in your house. You should call Dodson Property Management. So we wanted to market. We spent marketing resources and time are limited. So we wanted to spend all of our time then getting in front of as many realtors, building relationships. So they recommended us. And then 2012 and beyond, like Google became more and more important. And so we spent all of our time and energy pouring our money and time into building our website. So it was Google Optimal and SEO and all that. So we would pop up first in Google. But that's going to keep changing over time, is like, where's your client when they recommend they need you? How do I get in front of them? And then the second set of questions is, what is the experience my client wants and expects? And how do I build my systems so that I meet those expectations and provide a good experience? And we spent all of our time and energy, with a maniacal focus on the customer experience. Everything we did was based around that customer experience.
Vince, put a bow on this, and then Mike just reminded me I do have one more question I have to ask everybody.
Yeah, I think it goes into just knowing your identity and staying disciplined. I think as you grow in any market, I think I alluded to it earlier, it's easy to just chase opportunities and chase revenue. I think, Matthew will like this. I think you referenced good to great a lot. the hedgehog. Like what is your hedgehog? And particularly in property management, it's pretty easy to lose your identity through growth. Or if you buy companies that may not look like your company, then all of a sudden you're trying to transform into what they were. If you're a single family property manager and you buy a company that has a bunch of multifamily, you assume the same processes work across the board, and you lose sight of what you're good at. So I just would recommend staying disciplined and continuing to look in the mirror and uh, understand if you know who you are as a business.
So when we were doing the property management roundtable, the last question we would always ask is, what book are you reading or what are you listening to grow? We had to add that second part because Tim doesn't read. So we had to add some sort of audio version of that question. So we'll go back from Vince to Duke to Tim to Mike with that question. What book are you reading or what are you listening to right now?
So maybe I'm a little late to the game, but I was introduced to Finding Mastery, the podcast Finding Mastery. It's incredible. I highly recommend it. Today I was just pulling it up. It was Leadership Tactics from Battlefields to Boardrooms, General Stanley McChrystal from a 4-star general. And it's an amazing listen.
That's awesome. Dude.
Me? So I go through spells in my life where I read a lot at night, and I go through spells in my life where I cannot read at night with my attention span. I've got major like attention span issues. And so I'm in about a year where I can't not read a book. I'm kind of like Tim right now. So I'm listening to a lot of podcasts. And one of the businesses that we've kind of plowed time and energy money into since we exited the single family management space is sports cards. And so I'm obsessed with, like, that's the new rabbit hole I'm down, is like baseball cards, basketball cards, football cards. So there's a podcast called Sports Card Strategy, and I devour that 4 or 5 times a week. And that's what I'm plowing my time into. Not helpful for this podcast, but you asked. So go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, I do and can read. It was a joke from back in the podcast day where I was trying to make fun of those guys. But I got 2 things right now. I am in fact reading the hardcover of Rich Paul's book, who is LeBron James's pal from growing up and business manager. It's called Lucky Me. I'm just really early on into it. It's more about his story now, but I think it gets into the business stuff later. And then I'm listening to kind of an oldie book, but it's called The Coaching Habit. And it's about coaching up your people in short bursts and making sure that you make time for your people. So don't just give them the phone and tell them to go, like Duke said earlier, but actually spending the time. We're all busy, and it's important to make time that we're doing that coaching. So I'm really enjoying that one.
Have you seen The Last Dance, Tim?
I have. I saw a little bit of it. It was good. If I made a documentary about myself, I would also make myself look like the best basketball player of all time as well.
The NBA made it. Go ahead.
No, they didn't.
Doing. I'm trying to create enough content here where I can make a documentary about myself.
We almost made it an entire show without talking about Elon Musk, but I couldn't let that happen. So I'm currently reading Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson and highly recommend it. Awesome book. Dude's just nuts. And I don't think it was him that quoted this, but I heard this quote yesterday. I'm going to get it in before the end. He said, "You can work from home 2 days a week, every Saturday and Sunday."
Spencer will probably want to close this out, but I am reading the book Titan, which is about Rockefeller. It's a biography on him. One of the things that I have started using, though, which is pretty cool, is an app called Readwise. If you listen to a lot of the podcasts, like Founders Podcasts, or there's a number of podcasts out there that are promoting this right now. But if you, like me, enjoy reading on a Kindle and you highlight, what Readwise does is ingest all your highlights. And then every day I read 5 of my highlights. And so it just kind of reminds me and allows me to get the reps on the stuff. So to Duke's point, I don't have to read books 5 or 7 times. I can literally read the important parts of it on a daily basis.
All right, I'll wind us up. I just started a book, 10 Times is Easier Than 2 Times, which is by Dan Sullivan. And he wrote it with somebody. I can't remember the guy's name he wrote it with.
They also wrote that Who Not How book that Mike was talking about earlier.
This is like their 3rd book in a series. So so far so good.
All good stuff, by the way. Those are great. They're great for people trying to grow a business.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your participation. And yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you all for joining us, all the panelists.
Great to have you guys back. Mike, we're only paying you for 75% of this. So.
All right, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
to
y'all.
everybody all the participants. Thank y'all.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks, guys.